She looked me in the eyes and said, "You don't excite me anymore." No hesitation, no emotion, just that dead, steady tone that people use when they've already rehearsed their cruelty. The world didn't slow down. It just went quiet. I stood there, still holding the glass of water I'd poured for her, and for a second, I thought I misheard. But she didn't blink. She just picked up her phone, smiled faintly at something on the screen, and kept scrolling. That was the moment everything inside me went cold. Not angry, not broken, just done. I didn't argue, didn't ask who she'd been texting. I just turned, placed the glass on the counter, and walked away. She thought she'd won. She thought silence meant defeat. She had no idea it was the sound of my exit. That night, she got ready for bed like nothing had happened. Her back turned to me, her laughter echoing faintly from a TikTok video, as if the world outside our bed still existed. I watched her for a moment, not as my wife, but as a stranger who happened to live in my house. Then I looked at the ceiling and smiled, not because I was okay, but because I finally understood something. You don't need to be loud to leave. Sometimes, you just stop showing up where you're no longer seen. The next morning, I woke early. No alarm, no routine, just clarity. I made 1 cup of Starbucks coffee instead of 2. The hum of the fridge, the faint sound of Apple TV in the background, and her absence from the kitchen, it all felt lighter somehow. She came downstairs later, still half asleep, asked if everything was fine. I said it was. She believed me. Of course she did. People like her always do, right before the silence swallows them whole. That day, I deleted our shared Spotify playlist. The songs that used to mean something now just sounded like background noise. I didn't text her once, didn't check in, didn't explain. And when I got home that evening, she was sitting on the couch watching Netflix, pretending not to wait for me. She looked up briefly, said I was quiet. I smiled. Just thinking, I told her. She didn't ask what about. Maybe she was afraid to. Maybe she already knew. Because that was the first day of my disappearance, slow, deliberate, and absolute. And the cruelest part? She hadn't even noticed yet. She didn't notice it at first. Maybe she thought my silence was temporary, a passing mood. But silence has a way of expanding, of filling every corner of a house until it becomes its own language. By the 3rd day, she was the one starting conversations. Pointless ones. About the weather, her co-workers, a sale at Target. I nodded, half listening, pretending to scroll through my phone. The more she talked, the more she realized she wasn't being heard, and that quiet panic began to set in. That's when I knew the shift was real. The next morning, she left early, her perfume lingering in the air like a ghost of who she used to be. I sat at the kitchen counter with a Starbucks cup, watching the condensation slide down the side while Apple TV played in the background. The world kept moving, but I was somewhere else entirely, calm, focused, detached. Every breath I took felt like a reclamation of space that had once belonged to her. That night, I came home late again. The house smelled like takeout and perfume. She was sitting on the couch, hair perfect, wine in hand, pretending to be unbothered. Netflix was paused on a romantic movie, one she used to make me watch. She looked up when I entered, her tone carefully casual as she mentioned she'd made dinner, my favorite. I nodded once, said I'd already eaten, and walked upstairs. No explanations, no apologies, just movement. That wordless detachment hit harder than any argument ever could. Over the next week, the air between us thickened. She started dressing better around the house, subtle makeup, little changes meant to draw my eyes. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I focused on my routines, early gym sessions, late drives, quiet dinners alone. Spotify became my companion again, not our shared playlists, but my own, songs that reminded me who I was before her moods dictated the temperature of my days. She tried to test me. One evening, she came downstairs in a silk robe she hadn't worn in years. The kind of thing she used to wear when she wanted to be adored. She lingered in the kitchen doorway, watching me rinse my dishes. I didn't look up. She asked if everything was okay, and I said I'd never felt better. I saw it in her eyes then, the crack forming, the unease she couldn't disguise. She wasn't used to being on the other side of indifference. That night, I lay awake, listening to her breathing beside me. Shallow, restless. She turned, probably expecting me to reach for her like I always did. But I stayed still. The silence between us was no longer empty. It was power. She had built our life on the belief that I needed her to feel whole. And now, she was realizing the truth. She wasn't the center anymore. She was the echo. I knew the silence was starting to bother her when she began narrating her days again, like a stranger trying to reintroduce herself to someone she used to know. She talked while making coffee, talked while scrolling through her phone, even talked to the dog we didn't have. I listened without responding. My quiet had become a mirror, and she was starting to see herself in it. One evening, I came home from the gym later than usual. The house was clean, too clean. Candles burning, table set for two, a bottle of wine breathing on the counter. The scent of her perfume lingered like bait in the air. She looked up as I walked in, smiling with that mix of confidence and uncertainty she used when she was trying to rewrite history. I said nothing. Went to the fridge, grabbed water, sat at the counter, and started scrolling through my phone. Her smile faded, replaced by that tight-lipped look she wore when control began slipping through her fingers. She told me she'd made dinner, some elaborate recipe she'd seen online. I nodded once, said I wasn't hungry, and went upstairs. I didn't slam the door. I didn't sigh. I just left her there in the flicker of candlelight, surrounded by food she'd cooked for a ghost. That was the night I knew the balance had officially shifted. For years, she had dictated the rhythm of this house. When we spoke, when we laughed, when we touched. Now the rhythm was gone, and she was dancing alone. The next few days followed a pattern. She would test, I would withdraw. She'd come into my office with casual questions about bills or errands, pretending to be engaged, pretending to care. I answered with the same flat calm every time. No tension, no tone, just distance. It unnerved her more than anger ever could. On Thursday, she showed up at my office unannounced. She said she was in the neighborhood, wanted to grab lunch. Her timing was deliberate. She wanted to check if I'd been out with someone else. She scanned my desk, the room, even my reflection in the window, looking for evidence of change. She didn't find any, and that unsettled her more than if she had. That night, I sat in the car outside our house for nearly an hour before going in. Spotify played quietly through the speakers, songs I hadn't heard in years. I thought about how peaceful it felt to exist without needing to explain myself. Inside, I could see her silhouette moving from room to room, pacing, checking her phone, pausing at the window like she might see me returning to the man she used to control. But I wasn't returning. I was recalibrating. I had learned the secret she never understood. Sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do isn't to fight for peace, but to become it. And that peace was finally mine. It was the following weekend when she finally cracked the illusion. Saturday morning sunlight poured into the kitchen, and I was already halfway through my Starbucks coffee when she came downstairs in workout clothes that looked too new, too deliberate. She said she was meeting friends for yoga, but the way she paused by the door told me it wasn't the full story. She lingered, waiting for me to ask who she was meeting or when she'd be back. I didn't. I just nodded, turned back to my laptop, and kept reading. She left without another word, but I caught her reflection in the glass, confused, maybe even insulted. When she returned that afternoon, she had that restless energy people carry when something hasn't gone according to plan. She clattered through the kitchen cabinets louder than necessary, humming a tune she clearly didn't know. I stayed seated, silent, scrolling through my phone. Eventually, she stopped pretending and asked if I wanted to go out that night. I told her I already had plans. She froze, her smile faltering just long enough for me to see the hit land. That evening, I actually did go out alone. A quiet restaurant downtown, low light, soft jazz, people laughing in corners about nothing important. I ordered steak and a glass of red wine, the kind I used to share with her. There was no tension, no eyes across the table waiting for approval. Just peace. The kind you don't notice until it's gone. When I came home, the living room was dark except for the glow of Netflix paused on the home screen. She was sitting there, hair still up, makeup untouched, a glass of untouched Chardonnay sweating beside her. She didn't say a word. Neither did I. The silence stretched between us like a wire pulled too tight. Then she broke it, asked where I'd been. I told her simply that I'd needed air. That was all. No lie, no elaboration. She nodded, jaw tense, then looked back at the screen as if pretending not to care could undo the truth. But I could see it in her reflection, the first flicker of fear. The next morning, she woke earlier than usual, tried to make breakfast, and even brewed coffee for two. The smell filled the house, warm and nostalgic. She placed a mug near me as I worked, waiting for acknowledgement. I thanked her, took a sip, and went back to typing. That was the moment her shoulders dropped. Not in relief, in defeat, because she finally understood something I'd learned weeks ago. You can't rebuild trust with routine. You can't unburn what's already turned to ash. She had spent months teaching me how to live without her. Now she was realizing I'd learned the lesson too well. By the end of that week, her confidence had begun to crumble. The small, calculated ways she used to maintain control, delays in affection, selective attention, those subtle power games, had stopped working. It was like watching someone try to light a match in the rain. Every spark died before it could catch. She started checking my phone whenever I left it on the counter, glancing at the screen like she was hunting for evidence that I'd moved on. I hadn't. But the beauty of silence is that it doesn't need proof to make someone spiral. One night, I walked in late again. The living room lights were low. Apple TV paused on a romantic drama she hadn't finished. She was sitting there, tense, eyes flicking between the door and her wine glass. I set my keys down, calm, steady. She asked where I'd been. I told her I went for a drive. She nodded too quickly, the kind of nod that hides something. I didn't press it. I didn't need to. That was her habit, not mine anymore. Later, as I sat on the edge of the bed scrolling through my phone, she stood in the doorway, watching me. Her voice broke the quiet, asking if I still loved her. I didn't look up right away. I wanted the pause to speak first. Then I said, evenly, that love doesn't disappear. It just gets quiet when it's not respected. She didn't reply, just turned off the light and lay down beside me, facing the wall. The next morning, I woke to the sound of her crying in the shower. It wasn't loud. It was that kind of broken sound people make when they finally realize what they've lost. For a moment, I almost felt something. Pity, nostalgia, maybe even the urge to comfort her. But then I remembered every night I'd spent staring at the ceiling while she scrolled through her phone, ignoring the man sitting 3 feet away. The sympathy vanished as fast as it came. That day, I made a quiet decision. I stopped tracking her movements. Stopped wondering where she went when she said she needed space. I wasn't interested anymore. Instead, I started investing in myself. A new wardrobe, a new gym routine, better meals. Not revenge, just refinement. The kind of care I used to give her redirected back to me. When she noticed, her voice changed. Softer, cautious, like she was speaking to someone she didn't want to lose again. She started asking if I wanted to go places, to reconnect, to try. I told her maybe someday. But in my mind, I already knew. Someday had already come and gone. Because once a man learns how peaceful silence can be, noise starts to sound like chains. And I was done living chained to someone who only valued me when I was walking away. The transformation wasn't loud. It was gradual, invisible at first, like the moment the tide starts to pull back before a storm. I became lighter, my movements slower but more deliberate. I stopped reacting altogether. Every word she threw at me landed in silence, and that silence unnerved her more than any argument could. She tried new tactics, overcompensation, nostalgia, even guilt. None of it worked. She was losing her audience, and she knew it. I started spending more time outside the house. Sometimes it was the gym, sometimes long walks downtown, sitting in small cafes with my headphones in, letting Spotify drown out everything that used to define me. I caught my reflection in the window once. Different posture, sharper eyes, a man quietly rebuilding. For years, I'd been orbiting her moods, trying to find meaning in her indifference. Now, I was the calm center, and she was the one spinning out. One night, she showed up at the kitchen table in tears. She said she didn't recognize us anymore, that everything felt off balance. I just listened. She wanted reassurance, a reaction, something to cling to. I gave her nothing but stillness. When she asked if I'd been seeing someone, I shook my head once. She didn't believe me, but that wasn't the point. The point was that for the first time, her imagination was louder than my silence. The next day, she texted me constantly. Random messages, memories, inside jokes, old photos. I didn't ignore her, but I didn't engage either. Nice memory, I'd reply. Hope your day's good. The kind of polite detachment that feels colder than cruelty. Each text became a reminder that she'd lost the version of me that once needed to reply with warmth. I noticed the shift in her behavior when she started coming home earlier, canceling plans with her friends, cooking dinner again. The scent of roasted garlic filled the house, the one that used to mean comfort. But now it just hung in the air, heavy and unfamiliar. I sat across from her at the table, eating in silence while she tried to make small talk. She laughed too loud at her own jokes, smiled too wide. She was trying to fill the space where my affection used to live. Later that night, I heard her on the phone with her sister, whispering that I'd changed, that I felt distant, unreachable. She was right. I had changed. But it wasn't distance, it was peace. She had spent so long teaching me to survive without her that by the time she wanted me back, I'd already learned how. And once a man learns to breathe in his own silence, there's no going back to the noise that used to suffocate him. It was around that time that the silence stopped being peaceful for her. I could feel it in the way she moved through the house, too carefully, like someone walking across broken glass. She'd pause in doorways before speaking, testing the air to see if I was open to conversation. I wasn't. I was calm, polite, unreachable. Every word she said came from a place of uncertainty now, as if she was trying to rebuild a bridge that had already burned down. One evening, she came home early from work. I was sitting on the back patio, watching the light fade behind the trees, a soft hum from the city in the distance. She stepped outside, holding 2 glasses of wine, the bottle of Chardonnay we used to share. She said she thought it would be nice to talk. I didn't say no, but I didn't say yes either. I just took the glass, nodded once, and looked back at the sunset. She tried to fill the silence, talking about work, about a coworker who'd gotten engaged, about how she'd been thinking a lot lately. Her words hung in the air like fog, heavy, unnecessary. When she asked if I ever thought about us, I turned to her and said quietly that I used to. That was all. She looked away, eyes glistening, and I knew she was realizing it. Realizing that the quiet she once demanded had turned into a wall she couldn't climb. Over the next few days, she became unpredictable. One morning, she made pancakes and played music in the kitchen, dancing like she used to. That night, she barely spoke. The swing between hope and despair had started, and I didn't feed either side. I gave her nothing to hold on to, no reaction to measure. My detachment had become her mirror, showing her exactly how she'd treated me for years. Then came the breaking point. I woke up to find her sitting on the floor beside the bed, phone in hand, eyes red. She asked if we were okay. I said we were fine. She said it didn't feel like it. I told her feelings change. Her breath hitched, but I didn't move to comfort her. She left the room, and I lay there listening to the sound of her pacing downstairs. That night, she didn't sleep beside me. The space between us stretched wide and cold, the silence no longer shared but separating. I stared at the ceiling, realizing something simple yet final. She wasn't my problem anymore. She was just the echo of who I used to love, fading with every quiet breath I took. By the time morning came, she was already gone, her coffee untouched on the counter. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't wonder where she went. When she left that morning, she didn't say where she was going. Just grabbed her keys, threw on a jacket, and vanished into the noise of the city. I sat at the table, sipping cold coffee, watching the sunlight crawl across the floorboards. There was no anger in me anymore. No ache, no curiosity, just stillness. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm has already done its worst. I'd survived the chaos, and now all that remained was quiet. Hours passed. The clock ticked, the fridge hummed, the world kept spinning. By evening, I saw her car pull into the driveway. She sat there for a long time before coming inside, like she was trying to rehearse a version of herself that might still matter to me. When she finally walked through the door, her face looked tired, not from lack of sleep, but from fighting a war she'd already lost. She said she needed to talk. I nodded once, told her to go ahead. She started with excuses, soft rewrites of the past, how she'd been under pressure, how she'd taken me for granted, how she didn't realize what she had until it was gone. Her voice cracked halfway through, but I didn't move. I didn't comfort her. I just listened. When she was done, she asked if I still loved her. I could have lied. It would have been easier for both of us. But I told her the truth, that love isn't always enough once respect is gone. She went silent then, staring at the floor like the answer she feared had just been spoken out loud. She whispered that she could change, that we could start over, and I believed she meant it. But the thing about starting over is that it only works if both people are standing in the same place. And I wasn't there anymore. That night, she cried herself to sleep beside me. I didn't touch her, didn't whisper promises I couldn't keep. I just lay there, listening to her breathing steady into exhaustion. In that silence, something inside me closed completely. The chapter didn't end with a fight. It ended with understanding. The next morning, she woke up to an empty house. My car was gone, my clothes packed, my side of the closet stripped bare. I hadn't slammed a single door. I'd just disappeared. No notes, no explanations. Only the faint smell of my cologne in the air and an untouched cup of coffee cooling on the counter. She wanted independence. She'd finally gotten it. Leaving wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. Every step I took out of that house felt like cutting a thread that had been strangling me slowly. I drove with the windows down, the night air cold and sharp against my face, music low and steady. The city lights blurred past like fading memories. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. That chapter had already collapsed behind me, silent and irreversible. I rented a small apartment downtown. Nothing fancy, just clean, minimal, quiet. The kind of place where peace didn't have to be earned, where silence wasn't a weapon. I filled the fridge with my own food, rearranged the furniture the way I liked it, and for the first time in years, every decision felt like mine. I slept without waiting for movement beside me. I woke up without checking if someone else was watching. Days turned into weeks, and she tried to reach out. First came the texts, short, uncertain messages about mail, about bills, about nothing that really mattered. Then came the longer ones, written in that shaky tone people use when pride and desperation are fighting for control. I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, just clarity. She had taught me that silence was power, and I had learned the lesson better than she ever expected. One evening, I saw her by chance. A grocery store of all places. She looked smaller somehow, standing there between aisles, holding a bottle of wine I used to buy for her. Our eyes met, and for a second, everything froze. There was no anger in her face this time, just something hollow, recognition, maybe even regret. She started to say something, but I gave her a small nod and walked past. The moment didn't need words. Some endings are clean only because they stay unspoken. Later that night, as I sat by the window of my apartment with a cup of coffee, I realized something that made me laugh quietly to myself. She had spent years trying to prove she didn't need me. And in the end, she was right. She didn't. But the irony was that I didn't need her either, and I had finally learned that not needing someone isn't emptiness. It's freedom. The world outside was quiet, the hum of cars distant, the air still. I leaned back in my chair, phone buzzing softly with another unread message from her. I didn't open it. I just let it fade into silence, the same way she once let me. Only this time, I wasn't the one waiting for the sound of a reply. The last time I saw her was 3 months later. A mutual friend's event. One of those social obligations neither of us could avoid without raising questions. I almost didn't recognize her at first. She looked different, thinner, quieter, her confidence replaced with something softer, more uncertain. When our eyes met across the room, she froze like she'd seen a ghost. Maybe she had. I wasn't the same man she left behind. I was composed, calm, untouchable in a way that silence had taught me to be. She approached me eventually, small steps, hesitant smile. She said she was glad to see me, that I looked well. I thanked her. My voice was even measured. No warmth, no bitterness, just distance. She asked if I'd been okay. I said I'd never been better. The way she looked at me then, it wasn't anger, and it wasn't sadness. It was disbelief. Like she was seeing the cost of her choices reflected back at her, and for the first time, she couldn't talk her way around it. She tried to bring up the past, to turn the moment into something meaningful. I didn't stop her, but I didn't contribute either. I just listened. She talked about how she'd been doing a lot of thinking, how she finally understood what she'd lost, how she wished things could have gone differently. When she said she missed me, there was a tremor in her voice, a vulnerability I'd begged for once upon a time. But it was too late. The man who would have done anything to hear those words didn't exist anymore. When the conversation ended, she reached out, touching my arm lightly. It was instinctive, desperate, a final attempt to find the connection she had once taken for granted. I looked at her hand, then at her face, and smiled. A real smile, but not the kind she wanted. I told her quietly, I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. She froze, her eyes searching mine for something that wasn't there anymore. I gave her one last nod, turned, and walked away. The noise of the room faded behind me, replaced by the calm rhythm of my own breathing. Outside, the night air felt clean. I walked past the parked cars, past the laughter spilling from the doorway, and into the quiet street. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of anyone else's expectations on my shoulders. I didn't need closure. I didn't need revenge. I just needed distance, and I finally had it. That was the moment I realized peace doesn't always come from winning someone back. Sometimes, it comes from walking away so completely that the silence you leave behind says everything words never could.